What's going on, young people? Happy Friday, or whenever you're watching this. We were going to do some notes in class, but since it's a digital learning day, I just wanted to go ahead and record everything so that you could do it at your own pace on an asynchronous schedule. So we're going to cover the notes from other learning. If you're watching this, you should have already watched the homework video about other learning. If you didn't watch the homework video yet, go watch that first, and then come back and watch this lecture kind of covering the same stuff, okay? But going a little bit deeper. We're gonna have like 3 new slides of information that we would have gone together in person on Friday. I just wanna make sure you understand before you take the FRQ Monday, Wednesday, and the multiple choice test Thursday, Friday. So we talked about aversive learning in that video, the idea that sometimes we have to get away from an unpleasant stimulus. Either we wanna escape it or we wanna prevent it from happening, right? So the question is, what happens if we try to get away from an unpleasant stimulus and it just keeps happening if we can't get away from it? So I need you to write this down in your notes. It can be under Unit 4, Day 3, or you can add it on to Unit 4, Day 4 under Other Learning. But I want you to write down this phrase, learned helplessness. What if you try everything you can but are not able to escape an unpleasant stimulus? So what will happen is eventually it's like your brain almost shuts down. You don't even want to try anymore. And a researcher named Martin Seligman studied this. So write down his name, circle his name. He studied what's called learned helplessness. And the way he did this experiment, kind of depressing, he took dogs, okay? And some dogs were put into a operant chamber, a crate, where half of the cage had an electrical shock underneath of it, and half of it did not, okay? And what happened was he would play a sound, and then shortly after the sound went off, this grid on the bottom would become electrified, and these dogs would get electrocuted. And pretty soon the dogs learned that when the sound went off, that they could jump from the one side to the other side, and then they'd be good and safe and fine. These dogs, totally normal, not stressed out, no negative long-term effects, because they learned that when the buzzer went off, they could escape the buzzer. Unfortunately, there was a different set of dogs, that the entire grid was electrified. So the buzzer would go off, and they would try and escape the sound, and they couldn't. Nothing would happen. They would just get shocked. Nothing they could do about it. Very depressing, unethical, problematic. Now, the even more unfortunate thing is these dogs that were getting shocked and shocked and shocked, they would get moved to a new crate, like the first dog's crate, where half the crate was bad and half the crate was okay. And the buzzer would go off, and these dogs, all they had to do was cross the fence to get to a safe space. And because they had never been able to get away from the unpleasant stimulus, they would just curl up in a ball, high anxiety, high cortisol, high stress, and they wouldn't even bother trying to escape. That is learned helplessness. If you've ever heard the story about how baby elephants will sometimes, they'll take a baby elephant and they'll like tie them up to a tiny little stake in the ground with a tiny piece of rope. When they're babies, they can't get away from that rope and that stake. And basically, as they get older and grow and grow and grow, because they have learned helplessness, because they feel like nothing they do matters, they don't even try anymore, okay? As humans, we can also experience learned helplessness. You might have a classmate or know somebody who maybe in elementary school or middle school, they had a tough time maybe with a teacher or a particular class or subject area, and they were like, you know what, nothing I do matters anymore, and they just gave up. That is learned helplessness, okay? My job as a teacher is to make you feel like your actions matter, that when you try hard, you can actually accomplish something, okay? So the opposite of learned helplessness is something called self-efficacy. It's the idea that your actions do matter and that you can succeed, okay? As a teacher, I love it when a student feels like they just can't get something accomplished or they can't learn it. And we try and we work at it and we try new ways and all of a sudden it clicks for them. That is self-efficacy, okay? That is what teachers are hoping for. That's what y'all need to be looking for in your lives, self-efficacy. It's a good thing. Your actions do matter, okay? If you fall into learned helplessness, you might end up being a pessimist, okay? So you don't need to write anything down from the slide. It's not going to be on a test, I promise. It's just something for you to think about the difference between optimists and pessimists. Okay, so optimists, when good things happen, optimists believe this good thing is going to keep happening. If one good thing is happening, more good things will happen. And this good thing is the result of me being awesome. So this is how optimists stay positive. They believe that good things are permanent, more good things will happen, and it's because they are awesome. Unfortunately, pessimists, when a good thing happens, they say, it's not going to last. I bet other things will be terrible, and I just got lucky. Now, in contrast, when a bad thing happens, right, when we're in a bad situation, optimists say, no worries, this isn't going to last very long. Just because there's one bad thing doesn't mean there'll be other bad things. And you know what? It's probably not my fault. In contrast, pessimists, when a bad thing happens, pessimists say, oh no, this bad thing is going to last forever. I bet other bad things will happen and it's all my fault. So we want to work on y'all losing your learned helplessness and having more self-efficacy, believing that you can actually make a difference. Your actions do matter. And I really do believe that, okay? And I want your brains to learn that. So even though Pavlov and Watson said learning was just biological, I like Kohler and Tolman's idea that no, learning has a cognitive component. You can think through new ideas. You can have that eureka moment, okay, that Kohler talked about. And I love this study that Tolman did with the mice. And here's a new name for you. I want you to write this down. Robert Rescorla. Okay, Rescorla. He did research into how your brain can actually understand new associations. So let me give you an example. If you always pair the bell with food, and anytime food comes out, if a bell has just been rung beforehand, that learning is going to be really strong, okay? Your brain's going to make a really strong connection between these two things. In contrast, if sometimes the bell gets rung without food, and if sometimes the food gets brought out and there was no bell, the learning is going to be weaker. So the idea here is that your brain is just, it's good at finding patterns and finding meaning. So Robert Rescorla said that we need to work on having strong associations between things for you to really understand. So if I'm taking notes here, Robert Rescorla, I'd write down the word predictability, and I just write what I bold and underline for you. That he said that when pairing is more reliable, more consistent, that the learning is going to be stronger. That's his big idea, okay? Great. So we talked about Tolman, we talked about the mice. Hopefully you watched the video, you should be good on that. I think it's so crazy that these mice that didn't get any reward for the first 11 days, all of a sudden, they were able to show their learning. That's pretty remarkable. And it's just that idea that sometimes you're learning and the learning doesn't show up until later, okay? That's what latent learning is all about. It's hidden, it doesn't pop up till later, all right? So when you learn something because of an external reason, when you learn something for a reinforcement, for a reward, we call that extrinsic motivation, okay? There will be a question on your free response about extrinsic motivation. Extrinsic motivation is when there is a reward, okay? It's when there is, maybe it's a trophy, maybe it's a cash prize, maybe it's a scholarship, but it's when you only do the behavior to get the thing. Sometimes in life, there are opportunities when you do something just because you enjoy it. You just listen to music because it's fun for you. You play a sport not to get a scholarship or to get into a college or to win a trophy, but you play the sport because it brings you joy. We call that internal motivation or intrinsic motivation. It's just because, it's just for yourself, okay? Sometimes I'll use the expression for its own sake. They have found that students learn better when they're learning not for a cash prize or because they want the specific grade or their parents will praise them or because of a job or a test score, but they found that students succeed most when they learn just because they are curious, just because they have an interest in the subject or because they just want to feel good about themselves. That is called intrinsic or internal or inner motivation. I understand that some of you are taking AP Psychology because you want the college credit or you want to look good on your application or because You want to get to 10 points for an AP class or whatever. You want to get into a good college. But I hope that some of you are learning just because it interests you and you're curious about the subject, and that's when learning happens the best. So extrinsic motivation is for an outside reward. Intrinsic motivation is just because it brings you joy on your own. That's normally what they say is the best form of learning. So here's another graphic that says the same kind of thing. Sometimes people do their tasks because they're going to get something out of it, a pay raise, money, a prize. Other times people do the task simply because, well, it brings them joy and they just feel like it's something that they're passionate about and it's fun for them. All right. Intrinsic, it's internal. Extrinsic, it's external. There's some outside reason for it, outside reward. All right, so I'm going to give you all opportunity to watch the video about Bandura and the Bobo dolls. We would have watched it in class together on Friday, but I'm just going to ask y'all to watch it on your own. But the idea here is that we learn by observing. So this will be important for your FRQ as well. We learn by watching others and seeing what happens to them. So make sure you can answer these questions. We'll talk about them in class Monday, Wednesday before you start the FRQ. I hope that you watch the video and understand about behavior therapy, Mary and Joseph, systematic desensitization, how we can slowly expose you to something to make you desensitized to it, okay? So make sure that you can answer these questions. We'll go over them together. Here's what you need to do. There is a quiz. We would have done it in class on Friday, but we don't have class. So your job is to get on Socrative.com. It's the same room code that we always have, Jones LHS, and you need to take the quiz. It's going to be 10 questions long over the last 2 days of notes, okay? Additionally, I mentioned in class that you should try to do these questions. It'll really help you out for the Monday, Wednesday free response, okay? You'll get a situation and you'll have to decide if it's classical conditioning. You can't control classical, it's a body reflex. Or if it's operant conditioning, there's some sort of reward or punishment or consequence at stake. So make sure you can look at the situation and determine if it's classical or operant, and then apply the vocabulary to those specific situations. So that is posted on the e-class. You can get some practice done. We'll talk about it Monday, Wednesday at the beginning of class. We'll do the FRQ towards the end of class. And then Thursday, Friday is multiple choice tests. So again, we'll do some review time at the beginning, and then you'll have time to take the multiple choice test towards the end. So before our next class, please, please, please take the quiz, okay? It's on Socrative. It'll be open all weekend. You can do it today, Friday, or you can do it over the weekend. Just make sure you do it before your next class so that you'll be ready for the free response and we can wrap up this Unit 4 before the end of next week. All right. Thank you guys. Appreciate y'all. Peace out.